when often the best way to do things is just going by feel and being observant and not being too up in your own head. That's where I see a lot of people who DM me, who message me they're, saying, oh, should I do eight to 10 reps or 10 to 12 reps? How about you just do as many as you can safely and then see where you are and then try to do more next week, right? There's nothing magic about a particular exercise or a particular rep range or a particular progression or anything like that. Just, start out, see where you are, and then try to get better.
It's not almost over. It's not almost over. You're not almost there. You're not almost there. You're not almost there.
Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I'm going to be talking with GVS, Geoffrey Verity Schofield, and we're going to be talking passion and possibly that you've been sold a bill of lies. Before we get into this topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos just like this. Appreciate you joining me. It's like past 9 p.m. your time?
Yeah, 9:04. But happy to be here.
Appreciate it. I woke up this morning early to do this because it's a little bit after 8 here. Opened up my phone and there was a video with you. I don't know, in natural hypertrophy or somebody. Like every time I open up my phone, you're doing a video with somebody else. So I kind of felt a little bit guilty.
No, it's something that I love doing. I love conversing with everyone in the community. And for me, making YouTube videos, it's fun. It's something I'm passionate about. But, having these kinds of conversations, it's way more rewarding. And this kind of stuff doesn't feel like work. It's not like editing a video or, writing a training plan or anything like that. It's just, this isn't even work to me, right? It's just something enjoyable. It's like talking to someone in the gym or something.
Yeah, man, whenever anybody DMs me or whatever, and they're like, I'm sorry to bother you, I'm like, man, bother me all day long. I mean, this is like better than working for a living. So anyway, before we get started, for the two people that don't know you that are watching, where can they find you?
So Geoffrey Verity Schofield on YouTube and Instagram, verityfit.com for books, and then GVS Fit on Twitter. I've started rambling over there as well.
Yeah, I noticed you already have more Twitter followers than me, but I've never been a big Twitter tweeter guy, so we won't let anybody know. So the other day I saw a video of yours roll by about passion, and I kind of had this moment of clarity where I realized somewhere along the line we have gotten almost completely disconnected with what it really takes to build muscle. We've gotten so much structure and so many exercise variations and so much information and, reps and reserve and just the sea of stuff, the science guys and all that. And I'm not inherently putting any of this down, but here's the thing. If I train with you, like if we were going to walk off this camera and train together, and I'm going to be like, you lead this workout, I would know how that workout was going to go. Like, I would be like, strap it on. Like, it's not going to be like some epic, brutal Tom Platz session, but I know we would be working hard, right? And there's kind of a lost variable where we don't even understand what hard work is anymore. And I feel like to a degree, the average lifter has been sold kind of a bill of lies in that they believe so much in all this stuff, but yet as a community, we've kind of let them down, as coaches and the whole fitness community, because they don't even understand what hard work is.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to see. And often people are focusing on the wrong things, perhaps because it's almost often sold, not necessarily sold financially, but just sold as in terms of an idea, as a way to get around hard work. Not always, but often. So, you could do 20 rep set of squats, or Or you could sit down and do this quote unquote optimized exercise. Like you could do pull ups, or you could do, this other exercise that is almost always easier. And I think those types of movements have their place, but usually the people doing them are not the ones that need them. Usually the people doing them are beginners. They're people who really just need to focus on the basic movements and progressing. And I'm not entirely against these kinds of optimized movements or setups. And again, I think they have value, but I wouldn't start there. And I see a lot of people trying to start there.
Yeah, I mean, you really need a base level of understanding of how to, optimize what you're doing before you start adding pieces to the puzzle. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, minimalism has sort of been making a comeback. I know Jeff Nippard has been, putting out content on that recently. I think that's a pretty decent place to start as a beginner. I see a lot of beginners doing tons of volume, tons of different exercises, and you need to start small if you want to be working hard. If you're doing 5 sets as a beginner, there's a good chance those are all just going through the motions, right? And so I would actually rather start a beginner on a fairly minimalistic plan, without a ton of volume, just focusing on the basics, nothing weird, maybe a bit of isolation, but nothing excessive. But, when I see a beginner who has 4 types of curls in a single day, I know that most of those are just fluff, right? And often I look at their programs and I could just cut probably 2/3 of it out, or maybe half of it out, because you need to learn how to work hard before you learn how to work a lot. If you learn how to work a lot first and then you try to work hard later, it just doesn't work nearly as well.
So, when I feel a little bit uncomfortable when I have discussions like this, because I almost feel like I'm propping, myself up like, well, we work hard and they don't work hard, and that's the magic key. And now you can pay us to find out what the magic key is, right? And we'll explain to you what working hard is for only $19.99. But it's not really like that. I mean, I want to see guys succeed. And, when it comes to working hard, I made a post yesterday on Instagram, kind of, just divide, just kind of combing through some of the basics. But what does it mean to you? I mean, can you quantify or set a structure to, what a beginner needs to think about when training hard?
So I try to get videos, and I think that is important because if someone just says they train hard, it doesn't mean all that much, right? And I agree that I don't want to frame it into a discussion of like, ooh, look at what we can do. No one else can. Like everyone can do it. Everyone can train hard. It's just a matter of developing that skill and looking at it like a skill. And as a skill, it can be improved. And so most beginners don't train hard. But then again, they don't necessarily need to in the very, very beginning. But it's a good skill. And this is why a lot of people plateau at some point, just because they're not getting all that much out of their set. And so I like to look at the entire set. And the whole set is not just when you're moving, it's before as well. So what are you thinking about when you're setting up? Are you just, checking your phone? Is your head in the clouds? Are you talking to someone else? When you're setting up for a lift, you should be focused on the lift and nothing else, right? You're just focused on execution, and it's going to be demanding. It's going to suck. It's going to take a lot out of you. It's going to be challenging. It's going to push you. You're going to have to push yourself. And so, if you're not taking 10, 20, maybe 30 seconds before a set, not necessarily visualizing what you're going to do, but that might be part of it, but just focusing, just getting your mind clear, I think you're messing up. Like you have to be able to do that. Then during the set, it kind of depends on the rep range, but typically there's going to be a slowing down as you approach failure. You can also look at someone's face. If someone's looking around during the set, I saw a guy the other day, he was on his phone doing leg extensions, literally on his phone, doing I don't know what, and then, going through the motions. So a proper set is not just going through the motions, it's making the motion actually do something. And if you look like you could read a newspaper when you're during a set, something has gone very, very wrong. That's doing almost nothing. Not quite nothing, but almost nothing. And once you're past a few months of lifting, you're going to have to up the effort and the intensity and the intensiveness if you want to actually progress. Often I will look at people's faces as well. This is not universal, but most people, as they get closer to failure, they will have some kind of wincing, some kind of grimace. If someone does a set and then just there's nothing, and then they
Right.
just finish and they just walk off and they're not wiped at all, like just it looked easy, then it probably was easy. And if it was easy, it was probably pretty useless, particularly for natural lifters. For enhanced guys, it seems like some of them do, it was so tough, and then they just finished the set and walked off. But I think if you're natural, you have to be able to actually stimulate something during the set, and that means it's going to be pretty tough.
Sometimes when it comes to being a more intermediate lifter after you build some strength, um, it's hard to do that on every set because there's kind of a balance point where you have to balance overall punishment. But for me, the minimum standard right now, even after 38 years, is at least one set out of every exercise has to be where I enter some form of alternate reality and and start seeing, it sounds dramatic, but you nailed it, right on the head, that at some point during some set, you have to, the thought has to enter your mind, I want to stop, right? At some point, if you're training and you don't get the thought in your head, I want to stop, like there's not mental pushback, you're probably not training hard enough.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And it's actually kind of interesting because for squats and deadlifts and these other big movements that probably don't have as much reward versus risk for pushing closer to failure, you'll get those sensations earlier. So,
Right.
on a 10 rep max of deadlifts, I mean, you probably want to stop at like rep 4 or something, right?
Right,
Like it's
right,
it's
right.
already such a challenging movement that even going to failure, I mean, doing 8 reps with your 10 rep max on a barbell back squat or a deadlift, I mean, that is day ruining, especially when you get pretty strong. So it's different than something like a chest supported row, where I would say failure is kind of just like the start of the set, and then you can continue on with intensity techniques. So, but in terms of like the stimulus and how challenging it is for these bigger movements that you don't need to push as close to failure, it's still a very hard effort, right? Like if you see someone finish a set of squats and they look very, they daintily jog off after the set, maybe it was a warm up, it might serve its purpose, but in terms of a working set, you can be pretty damn sure that it wasn't actually doing very much.
So you mentioned the big S word, stimulus, and this is kind of a triggering word to me. Stimulus to fatigue ratio, like it's one of these concepts that no concept is inherently evil or dangerous, but when we start overanalyzing stimulus to fatigue, at its core, it can almost go head to head with what we're trying to teach. And you ever meet somebody that's like, well, after my first exercise, I feel a little spent. So I need to pull back on the first exercise to make sure I get the most out of the second exercise and my stimulus to fatigue ratio. It's like, I don't even know what we're doing anymore at that point. Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's I think in terms of theory, stimulus to fatigue ratio is very, very hard to argue against, because you do want more stimulus and you do want less fatigue. But unless you're bumping up against the limit of what you can recover from, you don't really care about fatigue. You just want more stimulus, right? It's also very hard to actually quantify what actually gave you more stimulus, what actually gave you less fatigue. Plus, you can adapt over time to fatigue. So on an upper body workout, I might do 25, 30, sometimes 35 sets for chest and back. So, 10 or 15 sets for chest, 10 or 15 sets for back, and, maybe a little bit of shoulders thrown in or something. And I currently take all of them to failure or 0 reps in reserve. And people are like, well, how do you do that? Oh, like I would be sore for a week. Well, yeah, you would be sore for a week, but I've
Right.
adapted to it. I've been doing this for a while. And so people don't realize you can become very fatigue resistant through the repeated bout effect. So you really can do more than you think, especially if you build up to it gradually. And I think stimulus to fatigue ratio is very, very important when you're more advanced. But I also see a lot of people using it as an excuse. So saying, okay, well, I don't want fatigue, but I want some stimulus. Therefore, I'm not going to squat. I'm not going to deadlift. I'm not going to do any barbell lift because the fatigue ratio, it's off, right? It's too much fatigue.
Right.
But I think you have to realize fatigue is kind of just part of lifting. If you always avoid fatigue, you're going to be avoiding stimulus as well, right? They kind of go hand in hand to a certain extent.
I would argue that one of the most important things when you are starting out is the building of some reasonable degree of work capacity. If you do not build up a reasonable degree of work capacity, like for me, I did a 20 set. I did last week. I did the hardest triceps workout in my life, and I'm not exaggerating. I literally went into the YMCA with my wife and said, I'm going to have a near death experience because I'm feeling it today. Right. So I did like 20 sets, and like for me, I got sore, but I could handle that. I could handle that kind of punishment. Whatever exercises, whatever order I put in the exercise, it doesn't matter. But work capacity is so very, very important as a beginner. You need to be able to build up that work capacity. The guys that are like, I do pull-ups third in my workout and my pull-ups have dropped off. I want to move my pull-ups to first because I want to maintain my pull-up numbers because strength numbers matter when it comes to hypertrophy. The thing is, like, I don't generally program more than 6 exercises per workout. That's kind of my cap, for really anybody. And then we can kind of evolve things from there. But, you know, if you're a beginner and you're struggling after like 2 to 3 hard exercises, that's probably pretty normal. But then we have to kind of build that up over time where you can get through an hour session of hard work and do it consistently.
Yeah, 100% agree. My workouts usually last about 90 minutes, and I get a bunch of questions every single time I post a workout. How long did this take? And so I tell them, 85 minutes or 95 minutes or 80 minutes or something, whatever it is. And they usually are like, wow, that would have taken me 3 hours. That would have taken me 2 hours. Oh, I would have been there all day. And they don't, I guess they expect things to take way longer than they should. And that's part of work capacity. It's being able to just go from one exercise to the next and feel fine. You know, I've never puked in the gym.
No,
I've
neither.
never even come close. I'm not even sure how that would happen. I don't think I could. And that's not because I can't push myself. It's because I'm conditioned, right? And so unless it's like a track sprinting workout in the heat or something, if I see someone's lunch arriving again during the workout, to me that's not a good sign. First of all, you're losing some protein, dude, right? Like that's not useful for anyone. And second of all, it's a sign that maybe there's a lack of conditioning on there. Plus, you have people thinking that cardio kills your gains, and so they're spending 5 minutes or 6 minutes in between sets of bench press, that kind of stuff, and their head is in the wrong spot. Like you have to be able to push your sets hard, but also be able to recover from that, right? It's not just about the effort; it's about the resilience as well.
Yeah, basically, you need to bring up that work capacity to a reasonable level, and in the process, not worry about your numbers. And this kind of circles back to a video I made on Saturday, like stop worrying about strength, right? And I'm seen as kind of a strength guy, but I've always been a plus one guy. Like I never worried about strength. I worried about pushing sets harder than last time. And I hate to use that and and cite the Greg Doucette comments, but that's always what it was, man. Like I look at my logbook and I see like 10, 8, and 7 for exercise, and I want to get 11, 9, and I want to get something more than last time. So when it comes to building strength, I put together strength standards, and it's kind of soft goals, but they're not meant as something like achieve these strength standards and you're going to be big. It's like get into the gym, push hard, and over time, when you're pushing hard, these strength standards will kind of naturally evolve. And I get a lot of questions like, if your strength standards are legit, why is Geoffrey Schofield's bench press lower than yours? Well, I think I have a few exercises of mine that are lower than yours, and I won't hold that against you.
Yeah, no, it's like my best all-time bench press is 250 pounds, but people have to realize that I could break that pretty easily if I wanted to. I just don't really care. I get messages from people all the time who say like, "Oh, you have to do a strength program. We have to see what you can do for this lift. Oh, you need to do this." And I guess every time you try to specialize in strength, to a certain extent, could be small, could be large, you're kind of sacrificing at least the time that could be spent on hypertrophy. So I prefer just to have a very lengthy base phase where I have more training for reps, more exercise variation, variety, etc. And I've seen people who, yeah, they outbench me by 50 or even 100 pounds, but our so-called accessory lifts are pretty similar. Our dumbbell incline bench press or a machine press or something like that. And I'm not saying that I could necessarily lift what they lift instantaneously, or even with, a powerlifting block, because it takes a while to build up the skill necessary and the technique and the arching and the leg drive and everything. But I would say if you are building up those various quote unquote accessory exercises, then you know that you're going to be building hypertrophy, especially if you've had them in your program for a while, right? Like if I build up my incline dumbbell bench press to where it's 110 pounds for 10, right now it's 100 pounds for 7, I know that my chest is going to grow. It has to. It doesn't have a choice. It's the prime mover. It's a movement I've had in my program for like a year or 2 years or more. And so, I'm more focused on the lifts that are going to give me the greatest dividends for hypertrophy. And it just depends on your goals, right? Like if someone is more strength focused, they should probably still do some hypertrophy work, but they're going to be more specialized. Whereas I don't really care about that at all now. And so I am more of a generalist.
Over the years, as I traveled for work and got to interview more and more top natural bodybuilders, and when I was with Muscle and Strength, I got to go from I got to in the same month I got to interview Mr. North Carolina and then Mr. Minnesota. So I traveled all over the Midwest and East Coast, and to a man, I would walk into the gym and these guys were tossing around weights that made me whimper. But they didn't build that strength chasing strength. They built that strength in the world I built strength. Like when I see someone do a set of lat pull downs and they look like they're having a seizure and there's no control on the eccentric, like, that's part of the disconnect. We're moving weight through space and time, and you can get stronger without having as much hypertrophy focus as you could. And that's kind of the art form. You want to build strength in the hypertrophy context, controlling the weight, taking some of your sets so deep that you don't want to, continue, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it just depends on your goals, and there is an art to it. And I can see when someone is more advanced just based on how they move, right? Like when they're doing, incline dumbbell bench press, continuing on with that, they're really controlling the eccentric. They're not half repping it. They're not like, kicking their hips up or anything. They're really opening up the chest, getting a big stretch, contracting at the top, etc. And for every lift, there's a special way to do it for hypertrophy, right? And so it usually takes a few years to figure out exactly the technique to get the most out of the movement. And so, whether it's an RDL or whether it's a pull down, yeah, you're going to want to control the eccentric. You're going to want to make sure that the tension doesn't float too much into areas that you don't want it to be in. And usually you can feel this. You can feel if it goes from cheating a little bit where, you're still using your lats on a lat pull down to where now you're cheating a little bit too much and now it's more lower back. Now it's more, it's more of a glute workout than anything. And so you see a lot of beginners cheat and cheat badly. Whereas more advanced guys, maybe they're cheating a little bit, like there's a natural sway to it, but you can see that they're still controlling the eccentric. They're still targeting and stimulating the areas that they want to target and stimulate. And usually it takes a few years to figure out that technique. I mean, I didn't really learn how to do a lot of lifts until like 5 or 6 years of lifting. And so, especially if you don't have a coach, like it's probably going to take time, particularly now that there's so much bad information out there on, TikTok and Instagram. And so I think people should realize that, yeah, it probably will take time to find your form.
I think the first step for anybody watching is awareness, because these are conversations I really want to start having more as, somebody that's teaching muscle building, because I realized I've gotten so detached a little bit, because sometimes I spend all my time kicking back against principles like stop worrying about this, let's worry, and I don't get into the nuts and bolts. So awareness of this, I think, for anybody watching is key. Watch sets of various top level lifters, not power lifters, but watch how they do it. Just pick out a lift, seated cable row, and kind of watch the nuanced differences in how people do these things. I want to ask you one final question, and then I'll let you go, and I appreciate your time. Every time I get into trying to teach, like controlling the weight, like on seated cable rows, I drive my elbows back, then I control. I drive my elbows back and then I control. When I talk about control, I kind of have this mental tick from the mid 2000s where time under tension was everything, right? And it's like there's a difference, but it's like there's a difference between focusing on strength and hypertrophy and focusing solely on time under tension and a quality set. Like, I want there to be more tension in a set. I want there to be more inherent stress in a set, but I'm not focusing on time under tension. I'm focusing on control. But there's some gray area there with time under tension and control where we can almost focus too much on time under tension.
Yeah, I think my main issue with time under tension is that it takes out the proximity to failure and it takes out the effort. So what a lot of people do is they start using super lightweight and like they're controlling the eccentric, which is good, but the weight is so light, they're just trying to get to 45 seconds. They're just trying to get to 60 seconds. And then, 60 seconds is up on my, 20 kilo cable row or something, like 45 pounds. I mean, if that's an appropriate weight, it's fine. But if it's way lighter than it should be, then that's a problem. And so people are using super light weights and just sort of trying to pump the muscle. And that doesn't work if you're a natural lifter, right? So that's the main issue that I have with time under tension. I think probably thinking about it in terms of time under effort under tension is a good way of thinking about it. So you want to be close to failure, you want it to be high effort, but you also want to be controlling the weight. If you're doing a hang power clean or something, that's probably not going to be great for hypertrophy because it's high tension, but there's also not very much time, right? It's a high amount of effort because you're explosively trying to launch the bar up, but in terms of just the amount of time that there is tension and maximum effort, it's not that much. So I try to look at it as like a balance between having enough time during the set. If it only lasts 10 seconds, it's probably not enough, right? You need maybe, could be 25, could be 30, could be 45, but it should be a quality set as well.
That's, you could say the same thing for the mind muscle connection. Like, I've never been inherently against the mind muscle connection. I think I have more of a mind muscle connection on my 200-pound dumbbell rows than the world would ever think. But in that same context, I see guys doing like 40-pound dumbbell rows, and I'm not making fun of them, but I know that they never enter that zone where like they're starting to see some deity, right? Where they're starting to challenge why they're in that middle of that set.
Yeah, it's there was this guy at my old gym, and he was using, I think, 10 kilos to 22 pounds for his presses. I thought it was a warm up, but it wasn't. It was like the whole thing he did. And he's a bigger guy. He wasn't like, it wasn't an appropriate way for him. Like, it looked super easy and it was super light. And I was just kind of wondering, like, why? Like, what is he getting out of that? And I think, yeah, a set needs, if you just look at it from an evolutionary biology perspective, it has to be sufficiently challenging for your body to say, okay, well, we gotta make some changes around here. Like, this was enough to actually do something. And if you're many reps away from failure and it feels very easy, past those beginner gains, man, it's just not going to happen because you're not really giving the body a sufficient reason to grow. Not even like a stimulus in terms of pathways or mTOR or whatever. Just from a logical perspective, just from biology, from evolution, if it's not very, very challenging, the body's going to be like, well, nah, we don't need to really make any changes around here. And so I would say that the main thing that is limiting most people is just not focusing and pushing hard enough.
So in that realm, leaving yourself an out, giving yourself an out card. Here's what I mean. Yesterday, when I tried to outline what it means to work hard, I said at some point you have to have a progression scheme or a progression concept. And when you hit that, you don't leave yourself an out, you move up. But if you constantly never move up, there is, the quality of your sets is going to decrease because you're going to get stronger, but you're no longer going to be pushing. And I think there are a lot of guys, and this is a huge point, where they will get to a point on a lift and progression indicates that they move up and their form is solid and their connection with the lift is solid, but they never move up and they stay at the same weight for a long time. I'll give you a quick story. I had a guy come train with me 5 years back or 6 years back, and he was doing 40s on the dumbbell bench and he'd been training for 10 years. And I said, come on, man. I mean, grab the 70s, right, at least. And I wasn't being hard on the guy, but I knew the guy could do the 70s. And, he knocked out like 3 sets of 10. How important is it to, like, you have to set a path, but then you have to follow the path probably 80% of the time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where progression can be either a good thing or a bad thing. So having a fixed progression, it can be bad if it's too aggressive. And then your form starts breaking down or you're getting sloppy or you're cheating too much just because you have to add this 10 pounds to the bar or whatever. And so having a fixed progression can definitely bite you in the ass. I think especially when you're more advanced because progression is just naturally going to be slower. That's why your rep goal system is excellent. A double progression system where it's not just, add this much, go, because you might not always be able to add that much. On the other hand, yeah, I do notice people who they think, oh, well, when I feel good, I'll add weight. But you might not ever feel good. It might always feel pretty challenging. And if you wait for it to feel like straight up easy. Maybe like moderate is okay, but it's probably never going to feel easy. Like it's always going to feel heavy, especially on squats, deadlifts, RDLs, even a bench press. I get questions like, "What should I do when I unrack my bench press? It feels heavy." Well, it should feel heavy. It should feel challenging. You expect, unracking 200 pounds or something to just feel like a feather or something. And so I try not to be hard on people who are asking these questions, because often their concerns are legitimate, and there are often questions that I could easily see myself having asked, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But it's probably always going to feel challenging, and if it doesn't, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the answer for me is always ignore the feeling and focus on the form. Do what you can do safely. For me, it's always about doing what you can do safely. I've said 1,000 times on this channel, I don't like to use the term failure. I like to push sets for as many safe reps as possible. If at any time during a set something doesn't feel safe or something feels off, then, live to fight another day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is where someone asked me, and this is a very good question, which is more important, training to failure or progression? For me, I would go with the progression. If you can progress without training to failure, I mean, that's fantastic. It's wonderful. And if you're training to failure, but you're not progressing, well, then it could be something outside of the gym. It could be insufficient volume. It could be, your sleep is not good, diet, etc. Maybe you're trying to, be in too big of a caloric deficit or something like that. But when it comes to choosing between failure and progression, if it's just those two choices, choose progression. Now, often they go hand in hand, right? Someone plateaus because they're not training hard enough. It's not a big enough effort, and they would be better off training closer to failure. But if you have a fork in the road between failure and progression, I would say go for progression.
Yeah, if you can, and just focus on trying to get more out of sets, whatever that means. If you don't understand that concept, just work on it. More control, pushing it to the point where you don't want to continue, and then doing a little bit extra. All right, man, I've had you on for nearly 40 minutes, and I want to let you go. I really sincerely appreciate your time. Both of us are real close to 100,000 subscribers, so good luck, and I can't wait to see where you go from there. I'm really encouraged to see guys like you and Basement Bodybuilding and Bald Omni Man, and just the growing community that is kind of taking place right now. I've been in this game a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen a crop of I hate to say rookies, but it's like the glory years of the NBA when Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were playing. Like you guys are some shining stars. So I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, man, happy to be here. Also, Alex Leonidas just passed 300,000. I think he said. I think he said it's like the platinum era of natural bodybuilding, and I think that's a good way to sum it up.
All right, man. You have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.